Let's move next to a proper educational stock. It is involved a little bit with online type media. Of course, in the classrooms you'd have this stuff, but really what this one is about is private healthcare, not private healthcare, private schooling, here in South Africa. This is the market leader. Hard to believe because Curro, of course, is much newer than some of the other companies in this space. Established as lately as 1998 in Durbanville. It's been a fantastic success story. You have to give these guys credit. They are backed by the PSG Group, and they have zoomed to a market cap of 11.6 billion rand. Price to earnings ratio, wait for it, 154. So that tells you what kind of confidence the shareholders appear to have in their ability to deliver explosive growth, not in dividend paying mode. In fact, in contrast, it's been doing quite a lot of rights issues over the years to raise more money from shareholders. Okay, but I mean, they've done a lot of deals. The valuation looks quite high, but how do you feel about Chris van der Merwe and his business, Curro?
Look, I think don't look at the valuation. It's a growth stock. What you need to look at is management's effectiveness and ability to deliver on the growth that they've promised. And looking at what they've done over the last, the group's 18 years old now, they have been able to deliver on the promises with a lot of upside to come. I mean, we were looking at occupancy in the group sits at 60%.
Yep.
Yes, there's risk that they
could have 40% more students in their existing
buildings.
That's amazing.
So there is upside, and you know they're going to roll out their 2020 vision, which is 90 schools or 80 schools, 90,000 learners. So I do think if you're backing the team, they've done nothing up till now to not deliver on that faith you put in them.
Okay, so they're at about 36 or 40,000 scholars now. You say that by 2020 they want to double that, they want to have as many, and then they want to get the occupancies up. That must have a big hit on profitability, because if you get your occupancies up with your fixed costs, that's got to be huge. And they've done a lot of land procurement and building and so on. So you're saying that just kind of what they have in mind, let alone any acquisitions that they may do.
Correct.
Because we know there's been the attempted and failed acquisition attempt to buy Advotech. But I assume there are still some other schools that they could acquire as well, privately held schools that have been developed by other people or by other groups at this time.
That's right. So the 2020 vision is pure organic growth. That's any acquisitions will be earnings accretive. You'll see that PE come down if they do a deal, which was obviously the incentive to approach Advotech. So yes, I mean, I think there's always a risk buying growth stock. There's always a risk that they don't implement on the strategy, but so far so good.
One other question about market segmentation. People think, okay, well, the state education is sort of just about free, and then if you want to send your kid to St. Stithians College, you've got to find 100,000 rands a year. But the truth is there's a big gap in the middle there where people have got the ability to spend maybe 1,000 rand a month. And we know that the Curro schools, the fees are around 2.5. I think their Meridian option, which is cheaper, is only about 1,000 a month. So that's the growth market, you would think, because there's a limit to the number of people who can spend 100 to 150, 200,000 rand a year per child on sending to school. But there's quite a substantially larger market of people who can spend, say, between 10 and 25,000 rands a year.
That's exactly right. And it's a big market, Paul. I mean, these groups, or the private education group, caters for less than 5% of school-going people in South Africa. So there is a lot of blue sky there.
Okay, good. As far as the current team, though, is concerned, leaving aside any deal options, you've got full confidence. I think Santi Botha is still the chair of the board. She's ex-MTN and ex-AB, so she's pretty good. The PSG guys, I mean, they own, what is it, about 60% of the group?
50
It's come down a little. And they're going to write checks and back them in whatever way is required. If there's a rights issue, they love having that much of the stock. They're not short of funds. So there's really nothing I can see that would be a reason not to own these other than the valuation. But the valuation they can grow into so long as they continue to deliver the growth.
That's it. Maybe a new PR department. I think some of the more controversial issues in the news weren't handled as well as it could have been. But you're not seeing that really impact the numbers coming through the door. So
that'll be interesting, because of course it'll be interesting to see whether there is any impact of what has been a concern for certain parents, that they haven't necessarily been as diversity engineered and positive as they ought to
Sure.
have been, because what these schools ought to be would be a kind of advert for the new South Africa with everyone muscling in together, and these
True.
stories have been of concern. But what you're telling me is that you haven't perceived that to be negative in terms of student sign-ups yet.
We're not seeing it in the numbers. And one last point, Paul, there's a trend globally for governments to subsidize private schools because it takes strain off the fiscus. And maybe we are constrained from a government perspective now, but if those finances start to look better, there might be subsidies in the future for these type of groups.
That's a good point, because at the moment you get a sense it's a bit hostile, but maybe in future it'll be seen as a solution rather than as a competitor.